She outsmarted Wall Street's kings, and they called her Witch of Wall Street. Born in 1834 to one of America's richest Quaker families, built on the whaling trade of New Bedford. While other girls learned embroidery, she was balancing ledgers. When her father bought her a $1,200 wardrobe of gowns, worth more than $50,000 today, to attract suitors, the teenage Hetty sold them, invested in securities, and watched the fortune grow. To her, money wasn't for showing off. It was a power. When her father and her wealthy aunt both died in 1865, Hetty, then 31, stood to inherit about $10 million. Together, it was one of the largest fortunes in America, yet locked in trusts. She got the income, not the control. In that era, women were not trusted to manage great wealth. Hetty fought in court for years and swore never again to let anyone else hold her fortune. In the 1880s, for safety, Hetty decided to pull her money out of Cisco Bank. But when the bank reviewed the accounts, it discovered that her husband's railroad bonds pledged as collateral lost value and no longer covered his own loan. Using the shortfall as an excuse, they froze more than $25 million of her securities, though the gap was only about $400,000. Hetty quickly paid the gap in cash, then pulled out every dollar of her own and moved it to Chemical Bank, severing her finances from her husband once and for all. From childhood thrift to inheritance battles to her husband's failures, each trial hardened her. But Hetty's true legend wasn't built in family disputes. It was forged in 3 financial battles of her age. The Gilded Age was built on railroads. Every mile of track promised new towns, new markets, and new fortunes. To fund this expansion, railroads issued mountains of long-term bonds, promising steady interest far into the future once the lines were running. Banks and trust companies eagerly snapped them up, using short-term loans and the deposits of ordinary savers. The problem was that before the railroads began operating, those bonds brought in no cash. The gamble was simple. Hold the bonds now, and whenever money was needed, resell them to fresh investors. For a while it worked, but by 1873 railroads had overbuilt, laying tracks into empty plains that generated no revenue. Doubts spread about whether all those bonds would ever be repaid. Investors stopped buying. Suddenly, J. Cook and Company, the powerful investment bank that had underwritten the Northern Pacific Railroad, found itself sitting on piles of unsold bonds. Every dollar of cash had already gone into half-finished tracks, but the promised interest payments kept coming due. With no buyers, the only escape was to dump bonds at fire sale prices. On September 18, 1873, J. Cook and Company collapsed. That desperation triggered a spiral. Each sale pushed prices lower, wiping out balance sheets. Crowds gathered outside banks, demanding their savings. Institutions toppled one after another, unable to meet withdrawals. Even the mighty New York Stock Exchange was forced to shut its doors for 10 days, the first time in history. In this world of reckless borrowing and frantic speculation, Hetty Green stood apart. She always hoarded cash, avoided leverage, and waited patiently on the sidelines. When the crash came and assets were dumped for pennies, she began buying railroad bonds, mortgages, government securities, always at rock-bottom prices. While others panicked, she moved silently. When stability returned, those investments doubled or tripled in value. The titans who had strutted down Wall Street were ruined. Hetty, with her discipline and patience, emerged richer and stronger than before. Railroads made fortunes and ruined them. Among the giants was Collis P. Huntington, one of the Central Pacific Big Four. His playbook was ruthless, threatened to build a parallel line to destroy competitors, use political muscle to delay projects, and then buy out weakened shareholders at a discount. In the mid-1880s, a Texas branch line became his next target. As rumors swirled that Huntington would crush the stock, most shareholders panicked and sold. Prices sank. Everyone assumed Huntington would win as always, but not everyone. In the shadows, a woman in black was quietly buying the discarded shares. Hetty Green kept adding, never selling, until she controlled the key stretch of the Texas line that Huntington needed to complete his takeover. When he moved to finalize the deal, she struck, filing lawsuits to freeze his maneuvers and confronting him at shareholder meetings to block his votes. Courtrooms turned into battlegrounds, and every delay turned the deal into a slow bleed. Huntington had to keep paying interest on debt, covering maintenance, and funding stalled operations. What was supposed to be a quick, cheap conquest in 1885 dragged into a costly war of attrition. Finally, by 1886, Huntington caved. To end the drain, he agreed to buy out Hetty's stake, but at a premium price far above what he had planned. This wasn't a miser clutching pennies. It was a strategist who could turn patience into leverage and outlast even the most ruthless railroad king. In 1907, the fuse was lit by a man named F. Augustus Heinze. He was a Montana mining heir, basically a rich kid who wanted to play big on Wall Street. His target? United Copper Company. His plan was the classic short squeeze: buy up nearly all shares, force short sellers into a corner. No shares left, so they can only bid higher and higher to buy back the stock they borrowed. Then cash in as they scrambled. At first it worked. The stock shot up to $60, but Heinze miscalculated. He didn't control as many shares as he thought, and he lacked the funds to keep buying. More stock hit the market, the short slipped away, and the price collapsed to $10 almost overnight. Heinze had been funneling money from the Mercantile National Bank into his gamble. When the scheme imploded, depositors panicked, and soon after, New York's third largest trust company, Knickerbocker Trust, also failed. Confidence evaporated in an instant. Wall Street descended into chaos, and the entire financial system teetered on the edge of collapse. For New York City, the panic turned into a very real danger: bankruptcy. The city was running on short-term loans called revenue anticipation notes, borrowing against future tax money to cover payroll for police, firefighters, and teachers. But once payday arrived, banks refused to roll over the debt, and there was no cash. Bankruptcy loomed. That's when the rescuers stepped in. J.P. Morgan locked leading bankers in his private library and forced them to raise rescue funds, stabilizing banks and calming markets. But the city still couldn't pay its workers. At that moment, Hetty Green moved. She quietly wrote a personal check for $1.1 million, buying the city's notes at a 5.5% yield. New York got the breathing room it needed, and she secured a safe return backed by tax revenues. As for Augustus Heinze, prosecutors charged him with bank fraud. Though most charges were dropped for lack of evidence, he lost everything. He died in 1914 at only 44, ruined in both health and wealth. When Hetty Green died in 1916, her estate was worth about $200 million. They called her the witch, partly because she was a woman in a man's world, partly because her patched dress and cold oatmeal made easy jokes, but mostly because her success exposed how reckless the others had been. Her rules were simple: buy when others panic, never borrow, invest only in what you understand, and wait. While bankers chased leverage and wild bets, Hetty sat with cash in discipline. The press mocked her as a miser. History remembers her as something else: the first great value investor, long before Graham or Buffett. Thanks for watching. If the crossroads of faith, ancient secrets, innovation, and wealth intrigue you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. See you on the next journey beyond the visible.